Before we start, I think I need to emphasize that there may be different kinds of contacts, relations, impacts, and so on and so forth between what is happening in some countries in the northern parts of Africa. And notice that I'm using this term, northern parts of Africa, and I'll explain this later, yeah? And the other parts of Africa. Now, maybe one can say that, or just for the sake of making things simpler, I want to divide the possible impact, the possible interaction into two types, into two categories. One of them would be the short-term impact, which I will say it openly at the beginning, I think will be relatively negative, and I will explain in the course of this afternoon why. And then a long-term impact, which I think will be more positive. Now, but before starting to get into the details of this, let me just hint at one issue that I find really disturbing, especially here in North America, which is that in the minds of many people, and I really don't know exactly why, there is this kind of a strict division between Sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa. It seems that these are two different worlds, not connected with each other, having nothing to do with each other. Now, I will leave it for you and for specialists in African studies in this country and African American studies to discuss this further. But it is very important to keep in mind that the relations between the so-called northern parts of Africa and the southern parts of Africa are as old as history. Let me just give you one example. We have here a country which is called Egypt, which many of you know, yeah? And we have a country here which is called Ethiopia, which many of you also know. And beside Ethiopia, there was a part here, a country which had to fight for its own independence against Ethiopia, called Eritrea. Yeah. Now, look, you see that Ethiopia is in the Horn of Africa. It's in the east of Africa. It's generally considered a part of Sub-Saharan Africa. But when we go back a little bit into history, we can see that there is something that connects those two parts. It is not only the Nile, because the Nile, or a part of the Nile, this part of the Nile flows from Ethiopia, yeah, goes through the Sudan and then goes to Egypt, as you can see, yeah. So in addition to that, however, maybe some of you have heard of this. There are people in Egypt who are called Copts. Have you heard of them? The Copts in Egypt. These are the Christians in Egypt. Yeah? Okay. Egypt was for a very long time predominantly Christian. Yeah? And Ethiopia is also almost half, or maybe more than half of its inhabitants are also Christians. Yeah? As well as Eritrea. Yeah? Until today. Now, what many of us do not know is that the church, the Oriental Ethiopic and Eritrean churches, are a part of the Coptic church. They are different from the rest of the Christians. Although they are Eastern Christians, but they are not like Greek Orthodox Christians or Russian Orthodox Christians. They are what we call monophysites. Do you know what the monophysites are? They believe in the one nature of Christ. That is, they did not accept what was decided upon in Chalcedon. I don't know if you know the history of Christianity. In 451, there was a big congress for all the, big fathers of the early Christian church, in which they decided something that they had been fighting over. Yeah. After having decided the issue of the Holy Trinity, they were discussing whether Jesus had one nature or two natures, and what is the relationship, what is dominant in this, if Jesus had a dual nature, yeah? And the Patriarch of Alexandria was of the opinion that they were wrong about this, that they were dualists. That is, that most of the other parts of the church believed that Christ had two natures. And so he said, no, Jesus has only one nature. We have actually a few churches in the East, including the Copts and the church in Ethiopia and the church in Eritrea, that are monophysites. So they are different from the rest of the Christians. Yeah? So, I mean, this is just one example of this relationship. Yeah? Another example that I may give you is an example from West Africa. Yeah? We have here the Great Sahara, but from times immemorial, even before the Roman Empire, yeah, we know that there was a lot of trade taking place, especially two things, gold and wood, from this area here in the east, in West Africa, from this area up to the north and then to Europe, yeah? And there were very big trade routes, and I will talk more about the people who were responsible for the trade, who protected the trade, yeah? Who today can become a very big pain, yeah, for many governments in the area, yeah? Okay, so I'm sorry that I had to talk a little bit about the ancient history, but I think it's very important to keep this in mind, that the relations between different parts of Africa there was always contact, very important at all levels, religious, cultural, economic, and so on and so forth. And movement of population also. Okay. Let's try to see what impact. I'm not going to talk much or any. I'm not going to say anything about what is happening or what happened in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and so on and so forth, because we discussed this last week, and I don't want to talk about this unless you have questions. But let me go back again a little bit into what I think is a problem that faces Africa today. If any observer of the world situation, and maybe many of you are young not to remember this, but people who are as old as me will remember that sometime 3-4 decades ago, Africa had a much greater prominence in international affairs. So if you had asked people, let me ask you now, can you name any single leader in Africa? Can anyone please do that? Of the students, not of the old people. Yeah? Okay. Now, maybe people, of course, most people know Mandela. Yeah, I mean, Nelson Mandela. Who doesn't know Nelson Mandela? But other than Mandela, does anyone know any leader in Africa? Yes, please.
Mbeki.
Who is that?
President of South Africa.
Good. How many of you know him? Yeah? It's good. That's very good. But other than him, you don't know much, and, we hear mostly bad things about him, yeah? Going to court and then out of court, whether he's corrupt or not, yeah? Okay. But generally, the position of Africa in international affairs has relatively declined vis-a-vis Asia. Talk about Japan, China, India, these big countries. The Middle East, you talk about oil, although there is much oil also in Africa, yeah? And Latin America, yeah? So, relatively speaking, the status of Africa in international affairs has declined during the past decades. Now, I think that one of the most important reasons for this, there are many reasons, but one of the most important reasons for this is that the big populous African countries, which are Nigeria, Egypt, and Ethiopia, abdicated their international role, their African role. Yeah? This is number one. And number two, that post-Mandela South Africa could not shoulder the burdens. So within this general trend, I would like to go back a little bit to the 50s and try to see how things developed, and then see what possibilities there are for developments that will have an impact on Africa as such. In 1955, a conference was held in Indonesia in a small city called Bandung. Does anyone of the older people remember Bandung? 1955? Good. Yeah? Now, this was the first meeting of some leaders from Asia and Africa, yeah? And they formed what was known at that time as the Afro-Asian Union, the Afro-Asian whatever. I don't recall the exact name because it changed into the non-allied countries later on. Yeah. Now then there was a conference held 1957, if I'm not mistaken, in Cairo, and then there was another one held in Belgrade 1961, where the so-called non-aligned, or at the beginning, Afro-Asian countries came together. At that time, there were, leaders who became very important in the world. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, like Nasser from Egypt, like Tito from Yugoslavia, like Sukarno from Indonesia, and like Nehru from India. These were the people who said no to the big powers. They said no to Stalin and Khrushchev and the inheritors of Stalin, yeah? And they said no to the hegemony of the United States and Western Europe, yeah? And they wanted to chart their own path as third world countries that were after liberation. Now, this was very important because during that time, and some of us still remember this time, when leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Nasser in Africa meant something, when they were real symbols of anti-colonialism. They were the leaders with whom most African peoples, not leaders, but African peoples, felt a certain kind of a connection. So whenever Nkrumah would go and visit other African countries, or Nasser would go and visit some other African countries, you would see hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, yeah? And welcoming them, of course, not demonstrating against them. Now, let me just emphasize on one character who is Nasser, who ruled Egypt from 1952, but although he wasn't yet the president, but from 1952 until 1970 when he died. And I'm not interested in saying much about Nasser as a ruler, because I think he was a very charismatic dictator, yeah? But I'm interested in one thing. Nasser had an idea of the role of Egypt in the world. He said that Egypt was a part of three circles. First of all, the Arab circle. Second, the African circle. And third, the Afro-Asian third world circle. And so his thrust was basically on forging strong relations and making Egypt one of the leaders in all these three circles. That is in the Arab world, in Africa, and in the third world. Now, after the death of Nasser, another president came to Egypt who was Sadat. Yeah? He was followed by Mubarak, who was deposed recently. Yeah? Now, during this period from 1970 until 211, Egypt no longer looked at the Arab world or Africa or the third world. Egypt was looking only at the West, at Western Europe and at the United States, forging all sorts of economic and cultural relations with those countries after forging, of course, after signing the peace agreement with Israel. Yeah? So this was what the new ruling elite in Egypt was looking at. And therefore, there was a complete neglect of Africa. And many within the Egyptian regime. Now, in Egypt, there is a very big newspaper called Al-Ahram, which is actually something like the New York Times of the United States. Yeah? And there is a big research institute affiliated with Al-Ahram, which is a research institute for strategic studies. And they publish lots of studies about strategy, international strategy, the position of Egypt in the world, and so on and so forth. And even they, starting in the 90s, were publishing studies showing that Egyptian diplomacy, Egyptian international activities are completely ignoring Africa. They're not doing anything in Africa. Yeah? Although Egypt was one of the founding members of the Organization of African Unity, and Nasser played a very important role in the foundation of this organization. Now, so why am I saying all this? Why am I going back to history? Because I think that what has happened in Egypt during the past few months and the changes that are taking place will hopefully, but this will take some time, give us a new role for Egypt in Africa. And I hope that it will be a leading role. Not because I like Egypt, but because Egypt is a country that can and should play such a role in Africa. Of course, Egypt will not be alone, but Egypt in that sense will be a very strong supporter of South Africa, which is playing a role. But South Africa alone cannot shoulder that burden. The burden is too big. Yeah? Now, we have to bear in mind also that the two other big countries in Africa, which are actually the largest country when it comes to population in Africa is Nigeria. We don't really know how many people live in Nigeria, but it can be anywhere between 100 and 120 million. Yeah? And then we have Ethiopia, which is also almost as large as Egypt. Yeah? 80 to 85 million. Yeah? We are not sure. We don't have accurate data about this. Now, as you can see, what we have here, and let's look at it geopolitically. You have a country up there in the north, a big country in the west, and a big country in the east. And if we go down, sorry, but I'll make it a little bit smaller. I think I have to make it even smaller. Yeah? If we go down, then you can see South Africa. So they form the four corners of Africa. And thereby, I think that geostrategically and geopolitically, they can play a very important role together. Now, there is a problem, however, with that. Namely that Nigeria has lots of problems. Many, many problems. And I don't want to get into them in details because Nigeria has had no stability whatsoever. Nigeria has been a very unstable country with lots of coups d'etats. There is a lot of ethnic violence, religious violence. Yeah, again, almost 40% of the population of Nigeria are Christians. 43% are Muslims, and the rest are other religions. And there has been a lot of infighting. Yeah, and the country is very rich. It has oil. It is one of the biggest oil producers and exporters, and so there is a lot of money about which people are fighting. And as I said, there have been lots of coups d'etats. But the other country, which is Ethiopia, here, is also a country that has had its share of problems. It had a war with Somalia. Yeah, and you all hear about Somalia today, I think, in the news. Yeah, there are lots of problems in Somalia. Yeah, but Ethiopia has had a war over an area which is called Ogaden, which is right here. Yeah, Ogaden, and the two countries have had a war. Now, Ethiopian forces are in Somalia, helping the West. Let's put it this way in very, very broad terms. But Ethiopia has also had problems, and let me go back and make it a little bit larger now so that we can go back to the details and see. Okay. Ethiopia had its share of problems with Eritrea because Eritrea was a part of Ethiopia for many years, but the Eritreans wanted their independence. So they fought for many years, and after independence, there was a war between the two countries. Yeah? So basically, those two countries, those two big countries, I don't think can play an important role politically in Africa for the foreseeable future. And this is why it will befall two countries to play that role, to assume a certain kind of a role. that helps the other African countries and will have an impact on the whole politics, the whole conception of Africa as it is seen by Africans themselves. Not as it's seen here in the United States, yeah? But as it's seen by the Africans themselves. Now, let me very quickly, and I know you may have many questions about what I just said, but let me move now very quickly to what I said earlier, why I think on the short run, things will not be very positive in the area. Okay. This area here, which includes Niger, Mali, some parts of Nigeria, Burkina Faso, yeah, and even some parts of Mauritania. Now, this big area, and of course including Libya and Algeria. This is a very interesting area, and it's a very unstable area. All the civil wars that took place in Chad, in Niger, in Mali, yeah, have been basically based on this part, yeah, the northern parts of these states. Now, what do we have in these northern parts? These northern parts are mostly inhabited by a people which are called Tuaregs. Tuaregs are a very strange desert people. They are nomads, but they have been the people who were protecting trade caravans between West Africa and North Africa for many, many centuries. There is something very interesting about them. Tuaregs are Muslims, but they are the only Muslim people where women do not cover their faces. It's only men who cover their faces. I'll show you some pictures. You see, the anthropologist in me does not die. Yeah? This is a Tuareg man. Yeah? Okay? Completely covered. Yeah? This is a Tuareg woman and a family. Yeah? And this picture is from National Geographic, so I didn't make it. Yeah? Okay, these are also Tuareg men. As you can see, they are on horses and they have their faces. Yeah, these are men. All of these are men. Yeah. Now, this is something strange that many people do not know. But okay. Now, our interest in the Tuaregs is not because the men cover their faces. No, it's because a part of the Tuaregs live in southern Libya. Yeah, and as you know, there is a war going on in Libya now. Now, Tuaregs, until now, are supporting Gaddafi. Why? You have heard that one of Gaddafi's sons went to Niger, yeah? Which is right here, yeah? You see the border between the two countries, yeah? And this area is mostly inhabited by Tuaregs, all this area, even to the north of Niger, yeah? Okay. Now, there are reasons for this. In the 80s, when Gaddafi was trying to develop Libya, what he did, he didn't attempt to sedentarize the Tuaregs. What he did was, he told them, okay, you can stay nomadic. You can move wherever you want to go. What I will do is I will attach with your tents, with your homes, with your moving homes, yeah, clinics and schools that will move with you. Wherever you move, they will go with you. Yeah? This was very ingenious in a way, yeah? That they had their schools attached to them. They had their clinics, their doctors attached to them. Of course, the schools and the doctors will be in cars, in these big cars, yeah? But they will be going wherever they will follow, yeah, the nomads wherever they went. And he started giving them money, and he allowed them to carry weapons. And as you know, in the desert, you need weapons to protect yourself, yeah? So he became very, very popular amongst them. Now, they still support him until today. Not only in Libya, but the Tuaregs everywhere in that area. And I'm not saying bad things about the Tuaregs, but I want you to understand why I think that there will be a lot of instability in that area on the short run. It is because the Tuaregs have lots of money from Gaddafi, yeah? They have lots of weapons, Actually, Gaddafi opened up many of his small weaponry that he had in the south and gave it all to the nomads who live in southern Libya. Yeah, and this made him very, very popular. Now, the issue is that these people do not know borders, national borders, and so they keep roaming in the Sahara from east to west, from north to south. And because there is a lot of instability, there has been a lot of civil wars going on in Chad, in Niger, in Mali, yeah? Even in Burkina Faso and in northern Nigeria. So I think that many of these weapons will end up in the wrong hands. And we are seeing a bit of that happening now. So basically, I think that this will be negative. This will have a very negative impact on the stability in many of the Saharan countries, simply because of the presence of weapons and the presence of money, because he's using money. He has money, yeah? So all these things together, will result into this. Now, the two countries that are extremely terrified of this are not Sub-Saharan countries, because most of the Sub-Saharan countries do not have strong armies, yeah, to protect their own borders, especially these countries like Chad, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, and so on and so forth. But the countries that are afraid of this are Algeria and Morocco, which are two so-called North African countries. As you can see, Algeria is here. There are also many Tuaregs in Algeria, and Algeria is terrified of the Muslim fundamentalists. And they are afraid that a lot of these weapons will end up in the hands of the fundamentalists. Okay? So does this make it clear why I think there is a little bit of instability that one can foresee in the future in certain parts of Africa? On the other hand, why I think that on the long run, there are some positive signs, especially if Egypt reassumes its position in Africa. I would like to address only one other thing that is important, and I think that many people asked me about this during the past few weeks. Why is it that the African Union, that the government of South Africa, which is a great government, South Africa, come on, Mandela's guys, why are they not very much in favor of recognizing the anti-Gaddafi forces? Until today, they have not yet recognized the organization, the Organization of African Unity. I think this is its official title. Has not yet recognized the anti-Gaddafi forces. Many African governments do not like what they see. Well, it is not as simple as that. It is not because they like or dislike what they see of the anti-Gaddafi forces. I think that there are other reasons for this, and we have to be very, very careful about this. Which Western country was the country that was all for supporting the anti-Gaddafi forces? Which country was in the forefront of this? Yes? France. Very good. Now, do you know why? Or does anybody have any idea of why? There has to be reasons. Yeah? Okay. I'll just give you 2 or 3 main reasons. One of them is that since the opening up of relations between Gaddafi and the Western countries, after resolving the issues with the Lockerbie crisis and so on and so forth, there are British, Dutch, American, and of course Italians, yeah, because the Italians were the former colonists of Libya, yeah, and Japanese and Chinese companies working in the Libyan oil industry. There is not one single French company working in the Libyan oil industry. The other thing, however, is something that goes back a little bit into the 70s and the 80s. When Gaddafi was presenting himself as one of the big African leaders who is for the liberation of Africa from foreign imperialist, colonialist forces. Now, Gaddafi was always, in that sense, he was always siding with those with those powers in Africa that were anti-French. So in Chad, in Niger, in Mali, yeah, all the civil wars that were taking place, he was siding with the forces that had been traditionally anti-French. And by the way, remembering the people, the Tuaregs, whose men covered their faces, the Tuaregs are people who have been extremely anti-French. They were the ones who fought the French a lot in the southern parts of Algeria in the 19th century and in the 20th century. They fought the French in Niger, in Chad, and in Mali. Yeah? And it is very interesting that within this game, that the political game that Gaddafi was playing, he was supporting all these anti-French forces traditionally. And so the French have generally been, vehement antagonists of Gaddafi, yeah, for political reasons and as well as economic reasons. I think that this is an interesting issue to look at and to see why there are rumors. I don't know if you have read them during the past week, that there are some secret agreements between the present government in Libya and France, that they would give them 1/3 of the rights for oil excavation and so on. I think you heard about this. And of course, they are saying, no, this is not true. And they are talking about, there is also something else. In the early 1980s, Gaddafi wanted to buy weapons. And as you know, there was oil and there was money. And where from to buy weapons? I mean, there are very, very few sources to buy weapons from. Either Russia, and, well, he didn't like Russian weapons. He had used them before. The Egyptians had used them before, and they didn't like them. And the United States would not sell him weapons, yeah? So he thought of buying weapons from France, yeah? Especially Mirage aeroplanes, yeah? It didn't work. It didn't work because he wanted, they were negotiating and it didn't work. So since then also, now the French are looking at Libya today as being one of their weapons markets. Yeah? So there are lots of rumors that now the new transitional government, whatever, it's not really a government yet, but that's okay. Let's call it the transitional government, has agreed to buy weapons from Libya, from France, yeah? And that the French are going to have a very important role to play in what they call the reconstruction of Libya, yeah, after its liberation. Now, I wanted to look at things in a very kind of a macro manner, giving you one or two examples here and there, but I hope that I made myself clear as to the impact. And as you could see, I did not even mention South Sudan. Yeah? Because if I start talking about South Sudan, I will never stop. So, but if you have any questions about South Sudan, I will be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much.